New puppy, long night. Let's do this. Okay, today I'm going to teach you one phrase, just 7 simple words that you can use daily to become a better leader. I think it's 7. Yep, just 7 simple words. Now, before we get started, if you're running a company already, I want you to go grab your latest monthly income statement. Just pause the video and I'll be here when you get back. Because that's how pausing works, you idiot. Okay, do you have your income statement? Great. If you don't worry about it. You'll get the point. So let's start at the very top, because the way you read an income statement is you start at the top and you work your way down. So the very first line is revenue. That's how much your customers are paying you each month. Now, fun fact, you'll hear people say we got to focus on the top line or the bottom line. Well, when they talk about the top line, they mean revenue because it's the top line in your income statement. Isn't that interesting? No, it isn't. Okay, the next line down, or it could be a couple of lines, are your cost of goods sold, or COGS for short. Now, COGS are the costs required to produce the goods that you're selling. COGS also include your distribution costs. So if you're running a software as a service business, then your hosting costs on AWS or Google for your production servers are likely included in your COGS. Moving on down the income statement, the next line is your gross profit, which is simply your revenue minus all of your cost of goods sold. Now, if you take your gross profit number and you divide it by your revenue, that gives you your gross margin percentage, which is a really important metric to track. For example, if you're a software as a service business, you kind of want to be targeting 80% or above in terms of your gross margin percentage. If you're a hardware business, it's harder to peg. Most people agree that 50% is kind of the minimum you want to have for your gross margin percentage, but a lot of it depends on if you have any other revenue sources. So for example, we're investors in this company, Whoop. I'm wearing the band right now, and I'm on the board of this company. Whoop sells hardware, but their revenue model is actually based on a membership fee, so they're targeting more SaaS-like metrics for their margins instead of traditional hardware margins. Okay, what does this have to do with being an awesome leader? Absolutely nothing. But if you're going to run a company, you need to know how to read the income statement. And a lot of founders put this off because they think it's hard. They think you have to be an accountant. It's actually really simple, so I like to take every opportunity to explain it and reinforce it. We're most of the way through the material lines of the income statement, and we've done 1 subtraction and 1 division. It's not that hard. Finally, we're getting ready to talk about the point of this whole exercise, which is leadership. If you forgot that topic, it was a long time ago. So these next several lines on your income statement are your operating expenses. This is what it costs you to run your business on a day-to-day basis. So you'll find things like your marketing expenses. If you're renting an office, you'll find your lease here. Now, I want you to look through all these expenses and see if one of them kind of jumps off the page as being larger than the other. For most of our companies, it's their people cost, their salaries, or as cold-hearted venture capitalists like me refer to it, their labor costs. For many companies, this is the largest expense. It matters, so let's talk about it. Another way to think about these labor costs is that the largest investment your business is making is in your people. Now, you hear business leaders talk all the time about ROI, or return on investment. Well, that's an interesting way to think about it, because if your largest investment is in people and you want to get the largest possible return, what it comes down to is you need to get the most out of every person on your team. And that's what great leadership is all about. And that's the point of this discussion today. How do you get the most out of every person on your team? Jesus, I'm like 20 minutes in and I'm just now getting to the point. Okay, let's break it down a little bit. How am I going to get the most out of every person on my team? Well, let's pause for a second and think about, what are you actually paying for? If you're hiring knowledge workers, so not people that are skilled laborers or people that are good with their hands, then what you're really paying for are their brains. And if you want to maximize their output, then what you're going to do is put them in an environment where they can use their brains to maximum effectiveness. Now, this might sound silly or obvious, but it's shocking how many companies go to great lengths to make sure that their people never use their brains. They surround them with rules and process to keep them in line. And that's the opposite of great leadership. Great leaders are always looking for their employees to be thoughtful, to leverage their brain, because after all, that's what you're paying for. If you want to get a massive return on your largest investment, your people, it starts with simply empowering them. And that means trusting them to use their brains. Now, I wrote a post years ago around trust and how trust can scale, and I talk a lot about the difference between process and bureaucracy. I'll include a link to that down below if you want to go read that, and I'll go into more detail. But the point here is to maximize the return on people, let them use their brains, and that starts with empowering them through trust. So how do you build an organization that is built on trust? Well, here's a few things to consider. Number one, don't start from the position that trust has to be earned. Too many organizations operate from a position that trust is something that you earn once you join a company. This makes no sense to me. It's like buying a racehorse and then confining it to a small pen and then saying, all right, let's see how fast she can go. If you really want to see what potential a racehorse has, you let it out into an open field, or you put her on the track and you let her run. In my observation, the best leaders start with the position that every person that joins their company can be trusted from the very first day. They let their people run. And that's the best way to quickly figure out somebody's true intentions and their true potential. Can everyone actually be trusted? Sadly, no. Sometimes you hire the wrong people. But in my experience, the vast majority of people, I don't know if it's 95% or 98%, but the vast majority of people can be trusted. And you should build your company towards the majority. But so many people focus on building all these rules that punish the majority for this tiny percentage that can't be trusted. Now, here's a little tip. If you start out in a position of trust, you are going to hire some people that can't be trusted. But if you put them in an environment where you're empowering them, they'll reveal their true version of themselves much faster than if you put them in an environment where there are lots of rules and structures for them to hide behind. Okay, let's move on to the second consideration if you want to become a trust-based leader. You have to force your team to make decisions. Now, if you're new to being the top person in the organization, it's super tempting to think, finally, I get to call the shots. I'm the boss. I'm in charge. You just have to remember the ramifications of that. What you're effectively saying is, okay, now the organization is going to rely solely on my brain power instead of leveraging our largest investment in all these people and all their brains. Now, this problem can be compounding because as a leader, you're tempted to make decisions, but also the people on your team probably want you to make the decisions. You see, making decisions is hard because it comes with accountability, and most people would much rather have their managers make a decision for them than they make the decision themselves and be accountable for it. So you got this double whammy. You want to make the decision, and your team wants you to make decision. But if you're going to empower your organization, or you're going to get the most out of your people, you've got to force them to use their brains. You got to force them to make decisions. And this brings us to those 7 words that you can use daily to become a great leader. Here they are. I trust you to make the decision. As a leader of a company, you're going to find yourself in situations all the time where people on your team are coming to you with hard decisions. They're hard because there's no obvious answer. As we talked about in my last video around values, hard decisions require trade-offs, and your team would much rather you make the decision and decide the trade-offs than them making the decision and being held accountable for those results. And as the boss, you might be super tempted. Hey, I'm in charge. I've earned the right to call these shots. But ask yourself, if they are closest to the situation, if they have all the data, aren't they the best people to make the decision versus you, just another person expressing your opinion? Now, you might be thinking, Moody, as CEO, as the leader of the company, I actually have a unique perspective. See, I have a really broad perspective where these role players have a very limited perspective. And so that's why I get to make the decision. Maybe, but think of it this way. You could make the decision because you have a different perspective, but they have most of the data. Or you could empower them by sharing your perspective and still forcing them to make the decision. Saying, I trust you to make the decision, trains them that you trust them and that you're empowering them and you're going to hold them accountable. And that's ultimately what great leadership is all about. Will they get some decisions wrong? Of course they will. And so will you when you make decisions. Everybody does. And that leads to point number 3. Create an environment where mistakes are openly embraced as an opportunity to learn and get better. Sure, it's easy to use the words, I trust you to make the decision. But then if your actions lead to a lack of trust through ridicule or criticism when they make the wrong decision, you're really training people to not make decisions, to not use their brains, and you'll find yourself running an organization that's limited to just your brain power. You've got to openly embrace mistakes and talk about each mistake as an opportunity to learn and get better. And that's it. It's just that simple. If you want to be a great business leader, you'll figure out how to get a return on your largest investment, which is your people. And that comes through empowerment. And empowerment comes through trust. I trust you to make the decision. So here's a little assignment for you. For the rest of this week and all of next week, when people come to you with hard decisions like they always do, instead of giving your opinion, I want you to pause for a second and say something like this. It sounds like you have all the data. I trust you to make the right decision. Now, over the course of just a few weeks and certainly a few months, what you're going to feel is the mindset of your organization shift. They're going to start to feel more empowered, and suddenly your organization is going to feel like it's moving faster and it's making better decisions. I trust you to make the decision. Thanks so much for watching. If you haven't hit the subscribe button, please consider click on the subscribe. It means a ton because it says you want to see more content, and I need encouragement to continue to make new content. Also, don't hesitate to ask questions or put comments down below. I love seeing the dialogue continue after the video is posted. All right, that's it. I'll see you on the next episode. Cheers.